Well, hello and welcome to April 29th. We are having a public discussion here at RecPoker about playing online, some tools, some tricks of the trade, just an open chat about online play. So I'm joined here by Taylor Moss, John Somsky, and Rob Washam, part of the RecPoker podcast panel. And we don't have too much set up here. We did one of these last month and just talked a bit about some general principles, and it took a while to load some screens while we were streaming. So I've preloaded a few in Poker Tracker and a couple websites just to streamline our little presentation here. So if anyone has any questions, or if any of the participants in the chat want to get a question, just type it in and we'll get to that. So basically, to not take anyone's time, someone had asked earlier how to choose which HUD is right for you. And I think the real key is just the right HUD for you. That's exactly what it's about. And I'd think more about it in terms of what are the stats that are important to your game, and Taylor is a great example of someone. Taylor and I come at this from different sides. Taylor likes to have a small, simple HUD that he can look at, immediately glean some crucial information, and then make some case-by-case decisions in his mind about how to exploit that opponent and how to play that hand. I like to have a bigger picture about the player, how they play over multiple streets and stuff like that, and then that gives me sort of a different kind of instant picture for how I like to make decisions inside the hand. So
And a lot of that is like the nature of like what we play too. Like I play tournaments with a huge like player base where I'm not seeing people that frequently. I don't have that many multi-street types of views that I can see from people. So I just want like the pre-flop type stuff, and I want it easy to grab. You're playing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot more cash, a lot more hand hands with the same people over and over again. So you're getting that like complete view, where a lot of my like turn and river data is so incomplete that I've only seen this player play, maybe 2 turns and 1 river, which I can't really get too much information from. But you've seen a ton of that because you're playing deep stacked and cash versus the same people a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And because when I used to multi-table more, I'd play some cash and some tournaments at the same time, and I would try and just use the same HUD for both. So even though I play a lot of tournaments now, I still use that same HUD, and it definitely does have more information than you'd ever need for a typical tournament setting. As you say, you're just not going to see those opponents enough to get that kind of later street data effectively. And it can even be misleading when it's not a big enough data set. And if you look at it and you think that it's accurate, but it's actually a small data set, that can work against you. So when you're choosing a HUD, really just think about what are the stats that are important to you. What stats do you use when you are trying to exploit opponents? What are the stats that you want to know about opponents that you are concerned are exploiting you? So I think everyone's going to want something that's got like voluntarily put in pot, VPI, pre-flop raise, PFR, and 3-bet, for instance. I think a lot of people get value out of flop C-bet and fold to flop C-bet. Some people like aggression factor. Some people like aggression frequency. There's a lot of different ways you can get at that. We'll look at a couple examples further on. But the real question is, what are the stats that you're looking for? And then I encourage you to build a HUD of your own. Start with one of the default ones that come with Poker Tracker 4, but tweak them, add stats, take stats away, move them around. There's a lot of customization to be done in there. And the real value, as Taylor says, is in having a HUD that you look at it and you know where the right stats are for you at that moment. So it'll always be a bit of a handicap using a HUD that you haven't built yourself, but I bet 98% of the players out there just use some default HUD. So you could give yourself an edge there if you get into this. And it is a lot of fun if you're a nerd like me. So one thing, why don't we pull up Poker Tracker here? So here's the main screen from Poker Tracker. This is the Play Poker tab. And I'm just going to go through the View Stats tab quickly. This is cash and also tournament tabs up here. So in cash, there's a lot. There's results, statistics, league tracker, my reports, and graphs. And there's lots of different ways to break these down within them. This is an example of the money flow chart, where in your cash games, you can see who your biggest top winners and losers are. It's just one of the fun ways you can analyze the data. Statistics has a bunch of really fun and exciting ways to visualize things. I love this heat map here. Um, let's just scroll this up. I don't want to change any of the settings because it'll take forever to load, but you can change different ways to query this data, and you can find out a lot. This isn't nominal. This is actually tracking the hands that I've played. So you can find out about yourself through stuff like this very easily. There's this leak tracker feature, and I'll just run it, and everyone who's watching can learn all my leaks here. Running at this bet size, or at this bet type, and this table size, we've got 130,000 hands or so, and it'll just take a while to run that little process through all of it. And then for each position, overall, small blind, big blind, all the way through, it'll give you a breakdown of winning players' ranges in green, and then the areas that you can win in, but you probably need some improvement there in light gray, and then in dark gray, the losing areas. So if you're looking at
Is
your
this
own
free
game,
for anyone, or is this an extra add-on to Poker Tracker?
this is free with Poker Tracker. So if you buy Poker Tracker, which you can do through, please go to rec.poker and sign up through our affiliate link, because it tells them that we sent you. This comes free with the program, or at least it did when I bought it. I'd be surprised if it didn't. It's been several years, but
I asked because I don't have the Leak Tracker tab at the top.
are you in cash or tournaments? Because
Tournaments.
it's only in cash.
Okay,
I don't know
makes
if that's
sense.
because there's too many variables in tournaments with stack sizes to put ranges together. I don't know, but it's an awesome feature for cash players anyway.
Okay.
And like this again, this is a subset that you set for stakes, table size, and bet type. So if you have a bunch of 6 max hands, these stats are going to be different. These ranges are going to be different. And so they'll analyze them differently, which I imagine is what's stopping them from doing it for tournaments as well. So that's the leak tracker, which is fantastic. There's other things you can do here, which I love. This overall, maybe this will take a while to load. A bell curve. So you can see how lucky and unlucky you're actually being with some of this stuff. You know how everyone likes to complain about they never hit sets? I can't complain about that. I'm actually hitting sets almost a full, what are they, what's that? Oh God, what is that?
Standard deviation.
Standard deviation. Thank you, stats nerds everywhere. Sorry about that. And I'm getting really unlucky with my straights. How weird is that? But that's just how it goes. So over the last 130,000 hands, um, I'm flopping sets. That explains a lot. My reports is a fantastic tab. It's a whole webinar in itself, so we're not going to get into it. But you can custom write specific reports based on players, individual player pools, sets of hands. It's very complicated. We won't get into it here. And then graphs. And of course, there's a million different types of graphs as well. This is just 3-betting percentages pre-flop, winning and losing players in the player pool. For tournaments, it's the same thing. There's only those 4 tabs. There's no leak tracker up here. Results, where you can select a bunch of different ways. I've got final hands at showdown, which just goes to show you how valuable one pair really is in the long run. Big loser for me. Statistics, where you can break down by position or by tournament, other things like that. And you can get a sense of your pre-flop stats and stuff like that. You can break it down by hand. Reports, again, we won't waste much time on. Graphs is a lot of fun. You can change the X and the Y on this to show anything you want. And you can format all these, you can configure all these stats boxes. All the filters are down here on the left side. I've used an unfiltered data set here just to make it easy, but you can do everything from specific types of tournaments, dates, bet types. So I'll go into more filters here, and you can see a lot of this stuff. You can get very specific about how deep you want to dig on some of this stuff. Um, Again, it's a whole webinar if you want to talk about different filters for this kind of thing.
Those filters are very useful.
Oh
You
yeah.
can go in there, you can start focusing in on certain parts of your game and say like, hey, uh, when I'm three betting in position, like how often am I doing things? And you can go and filter and say, okay, well, change it to hands that I played where I three bet and then got a chance to continuation bet or something like that. Or if you want to say, how am I playing it out of position when I'm calling? You can like put yourself as out of position. You call the pre-flop open and start drilling into those pieces and potentially identify areas where you're making mistakes. You
Yep.
have to know what you want to look for because you can't just be like, oh, well, find an area where I'm not doing well. It won't just do that, but if you start telling it where to look for, it'll give you some stats based off of different situations.
Yeah, and using the filters is a great way to get the most out of Poker Tracker 4. And there are some good videos on YouTube even showing you how to do that. You can, I've got some filters that I've built that if you just DM me, I'll send you a copy of. There's other people that work with PT4 a lot, like Sky Matsuhashi has a bunch of great filters that you can apply that'll specifically target your player pool and say, okay, these are the players that make these kinds of mistakes. These are the players that you can exploit in this way. And that's really what poker is. You know, poker is about learning the kind of opponents that you're playing against and then developing strategies and counter strategies to exploit them and to avoid their exploiting you. So any tools you can get to make that more effective, particularly online where you don't get to actually size somebody up across the table, um, you can get some pretty good information. So we talked a bit here about querying your own data to find out about your own leaks. And I'm going to pull up a website here called SharkScope, which is a good way to look up other players. So if you go to sharkscope.com, this is a paid site, but you can get 5 free searches each day as a visitor. So I just searched myself on PokerStars because that's where I do most of my tournament play. And this site only scrapes individual sites and players' usernames on those sites. One thing, if I'm in a big tournament and I get to a final table, I'll always search the 5 players that I think are the best players at the table on SharkScope and see if I can find out anything about them. Stuff like this table here, this statistics page, there's a bunch of different ways you can break down this data. It's not, one thing about SharkScope, it's not a perfect data set. They don't track knockout bounties, for instance. They just don't track it. This software works by looking at all the lobbies and all the different poker rooms around the world, and then the information that's there gets sorted, and they spit out this stuff for each player. If you so they'll have some stuff here that they do properly. They'll do the correct number of tournaments, for instance. They'll do the correct number of active days. They'll do the correct number of, first place finishes. But anything to do with ROI or profit is going to be I don't think they track rebuys, and I don't think they track, and I know they don't track bounties or knockouts. So you have to be, it's sort of like Hendon Mob in that it's a measure of someone's experience, but not necessarily a measure of their like success, if you know what I mean. They do have an ability rating up here, which is cool. I don't really know how they calculate that, but I'm sure it has something to do with the stakes you're playing and your win rate at those stakes. They also have a
Yeah,
fun, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say like you kind of hit some points, but you can't trust this 100%. You
Hmm.
can get pretty good information from it. I know from looking at my own, it's missing some things. It's my largest cash that I've gotten online. It totally missed.
Hmm.
I'm all right with it if other people are searching up and it missed my biggest cash, but stuff like that can go in there. And I know some things can get thrown off. I also won like a giveaway or like a Twitter thing to a high buy-in tournament, and it essentially just credits me with playing that tournament without like essentially like winning my way into it. So essentially negated my stats for that tournament that I was just gifted an entry into, which again, not like the worst thing in the world, but it can like throw things off like that. So it won't be 100% accurate, but it's still kind of good to see the overall representation of like how someone's doing. And what I really like it for is like your average stake that you play something at, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of just the overall like shape of their ROI gives you a decent understanding of how good of a player they are.
Yep, totally. And one other thing that's fun is they've got this achievements tab here, so you can go and see at a glance like what sort of types of things people are experiencing and what they're not. Some of this is like mixed game, some of it's like a lot in a day, some of it's a lot in a month, some of it's just lifetime stuff. Um, so there's a lot of like I say, you can sort of get a sense of someone's experience, but as Taylor said, it's not that precise when you're talking about like a earning or yeah, like I don't know how not tracking rebuys seems to be really problematic to me as well because it's going to affect pretty substantially the ROI of a lot of
And
tournaments
by
these days because they're
rebuys, do you mean the specific rebuy or like a re-entry?
I think I was checking their FAQ before I did this just to make sure I had the most current information, and they said that they just don't they only track the first uh, entry cost, and then the rest of them, in either case, they don't get counted against your losses in a way. Um, so
Hmm.
that's going to inflate ROI for some people, and then not counting bounty and knockout winnings is going to deflate ROI for some people as well. So um, I don't know, seems weird, but
Okay.
it's still nice. It gives you a sense of volume for sure, at least. And so I find it's helpful. I can tell at a glance if someone is playing on their first final table or something. That's going to give me a lot of information. I don't really need to know a lot more if I'm trying to just put them in a box quickly.
Hmm.
Um, so let me see. Let's go back to. Uh, so one thing that's handy, we'll just pull up. If you want, you can review any of the hands you've played here. You just right click and you can pull up a lot of different ways to look at these hands. I just pulled one up from a spin and go I was playing earlier. And up here, you can, even if you, like Taylor, for instance, might do this, if you are playing consistently with a simple HUD in game time, and you are in the lab after or in between sessions and you're looking at opponents and reviewing your own play. One thing that's fun is to, in that case, put a more comprehensive HUD down. And because you're not worried about making decisions in real time, you can just sort of get a glance at a player and see if they have any obvious holes. Now, you're not going to see it here because we don't have enough hands for any of that stuff. But you can see how switching your HUD in the replayer can be a good way to get kind of a different image of what an opponent looks like. And I'll just pull up. So here's the kind of HUD that gives Taylor hives. I don't know if you can see his face right now, but he's like writhing in pain. Um,
I have no idea what I'm looking at.
well,
Like,
right, yes, exactly. Um, but you can I'm just like you can see how it's just a different kind of interface basically. And yeah, I don't know. We probably shouldn't bother going through it because it's too without being well. Let me see if I have one. Yeah, I think it's probably going to be too boring to actually go through it individually. Um, Maybe I'll just bring up the HUD. Here we go. Yeah. No, no. No, you know what? It is. I don't think we should do it. we'll just skip this part. It's uh, it's just gonna be me talking stat by stat as we go through it. I don't think it's gonna help. It's hard for me to explain. I have like for me, I have sort of like I guess more intuitive understanding of it, just because to me it's more like a picture of the colors in different spots and how they relate to each other. Like one section is just for pre-flop, one section's for the flop, one's for overall player, that kind of thing. The stuff that you want to look for first is right there. But I think it's just more of an argument for getting to know your own HUD. Start with something simple. Start with something uh, here. These ones come with the program. Default and legacy,
Mhm.
professional. Professional even has a pop-up that you can use um, as part of your day-to-day play. It's relatively sophisticated. But start with something small. And then as you start delving into your own stats, think about the ways that your own leaks exist and how you'd want to be able to find those leaks in other players. And then think about adding those kind of stats to your HUD. Think about adding color ranges that give you a sense immediately, just at looking at it, which players are out of line where. Um, and if you're playing more tournaments, stick to the basic stuff that's going to be mostly about pre-flop and flop. All right. Does anybody want to mention anything about what we've talked about here so far?
I used the basic one for the longest time with Poker Tracker 4. And then I started to want to kind of like get different pieces of information, and there was other pieces that I just didn't ever use. So that's when I started to like create my own, and I would slowly like take something away and add something in and try and keep it as like manageable as I could. And then if I just wasn't using a piece of information, I would just take it off the HUD, and really only keep it if I couldn't find it anywhere else in terms of like the click out and being able to see the detailed information.
Yeah, that's great advice, because really it's your game's going to evolve as well, and you're going to start not needing to refer to some stats as often, and you're going to want to start looking at other stats more often and stuff like that. So it should be an evolution. Um, and you can kind of get anchored in one in a way. Like my big one, the big comprehensive one that I rely on, is has so many different little things that I've drilled down into it, and like specific color ranges for individual stats and stuff like that, for me to actually go through and make any real changes to it, and then to have to go do that all in the cache one as well to make sure that they're consistent. That's actually going to be an ordeal for me. So it's a sophisticated system, but it's got its own handcuffs and hangups there as well. Tweaking tweaking is not going to be as easy for me. It's, Now, I know we've talked about having a RecPoker HUD that will release sometime as part of our new launch this spring, and for Poker Tracker 4 members. I think we're actually going to do two. We'll do one that's based off the very basic default or legacy one, and then we'll do one that's sort of a little stepped up from that with some color ranges and some different stats. And RecPoker Nation, let us know if you like them and what we can do to adjust them. Well, I mean, I could talk about HUD stats forever, but I know someone's got to go win the home game. Is there anything you guys want to talk about? Is there anything that we want to look at? Should we look at my leak tracker again, and you can pick me apart and tell me all the ways you're gonna play better against me now that you know my weak points?
Yeah,
I have
actually
one,
seeing an example of how the leak tracker works would be good because I've never gotten into that much.
Yeah, great. I'd love to. Come, come use this information to destroy me. Let me see here.
will do.
Yeah, that's all you can do. Sorry, I've got this menu in the way here. Okay. So again, you can sample it down. I'm just going to keep all the cash games, all the cash hands in this set. So this will be all my 9-handed, low stakes, no limit cash games. But I think you should be able to import any other set of hands into this program. And then, of course, as Taylor says, and as you guys know, you can drill down into the individual aspects of it here on the left. But for that, we won't bother. So let me move this out of the way. So we'll just run this again, even though it's perfectly up to date. So I believe they take the information in your player pool, or maybe it's information in the Poker Tracker 4 player pool. I'm not sure. And they calculate the averages for winning players, break-even players, and losing players. And then once for each stat, once they've established a functional range for that, they graph them all out like this, chart them all out, and then your value is the black line. I've improved, because when I looked at this before, there were many spots where I was outside of the green or light gray area. Looks like I'm still 3-betting a little hot, but other than that, I feel pretty good about my placement in here. So this is overall, and then you can break it down by position. So let's just take a look through. And obviously there's going to be fewer hands for each position. There'll probably be more for middle position because they combine, early position and middle position, they combine all those spots. Whereas cutoff button, small blind, and big blind are always going to be those one individual seats. And I think, you can also, one thing that's interesting about this is you can also do this on a different player. So let's take a player. This is one of the players I've got a couple thousand hands in cash against. Let's run the leak analysis on them. It'll say you don't have enough hands. I should probably blur their name when I release this.
No. We all want to know about them. Tell us more.
And let's just let it go all the way through. And then, so again, not really enough hands to do anything. And they don't look like they're out of line. They fold blind to steal too much. So I've got that on my HUD. No, seriously, if I'm down here in the middle playing, the players on my left are over here. And so the whole right side of the HUD, that top right corner, is all how they respond to late position stuff. So the first number I look at is how often they fold their blind to late position steal. And if it's up there, oh baby, any two. So that's a great thing to be able to pull. And let me see, small blind in particular, they're overfolding, which is a common thing to find in player pools, overfolding the small blind. And he's not overfolding the big blind as much. So another thing that can tell you is that they're probably 3-betting out of the small blind tight, right? Let's see. Yeah, tighter than the big blind anyway, because they're just afraid of the small blind, which is frankly, it's a good thing to do. Look at that early position, 3-bet. So they haven't learned that lesson that you should always call the under the gun razor, right, guys? Because you can't establish a balanced 3-betting range there. So he's still learning. Spaghetti is still learning. Oh, now I got to blink that out. And they're getting to showdown, or is that winning at showdown? And that's went to showdown. Yeah,
I believe so.
Yeah, won money at showdown. So actually, he's really overperforming, winning money at showdown. I don't think that's a potential problem technically to Poker Tracker 4, but yeah. So I didn't highlight that earlier, but you can click on any of these and they'll tell you, and then each one of these will actually have a little video of that stat and how it's helpful to learn about that stat and how to exploit people that are using that stat, that are performing poorly in that area, that kind of thing. Yeah, so here you can tell this player is very passive on the flop and on the turn. their aggression factor and the aggression frequency is really low. Let's just do one more. Oops. Yeah, the wolf. What do you got? Won't be enough hands again, but see this person under 3 bets. Low aggression factor, so you'd expect to see those things together. And pretty low for a 1-win soft flop, which kind of surprises me because usually that means that if they're under 3 betting like that, they're usually getting to the flop with stronger holdings, but yeah, very passive. So this is all stuff that, I mean, to be honest, one of the cool things about my HUD is that you can actually just see a lot of this stuff at a glance. If you're just scrolling through, you're like, oh, they underfold the turn. Oh, they over raise the they check raise too often. They 2-bet the turn bet too often. So sort of one thing that's nice about it is that it tells you where to look outside of game time. If you want to make a note on a player, you can say, oh, okay, I got to go drill down a little deeper on this, which when you're playing cash against the same players a lot of it's more villain dependent, which is, I think, why I like the bounty tournaments more often too, because it's more about like beating one player at a time, if you know what I mean, like getting their chips. Maybe I'm just a jerk. It can be both. It could be both, I guess.
You're not a jerk.
You only know me over the
That's
internet.
Rob's opinion.
You wouldn't be doing your job if you weren't stealing the chip.
That's a good point. That's a good point. We all came here to play. Thanks, Rob. I appreciate that. Vote of support. John, was there anything else you wanted to take a look at in this leak tracker function?
No, I think that was good enough to let me understand how to go about learning more.
Cool.
Oh, I thought he was going to say how to play against you.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I'll put me
No,
up
I
again.
didn't need a poker tracker for that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'll put me up again in the background so that Taylor can make some exploitation notes.
Yeah, I just took a screenshot. Don't worry.
Oh, perfect. Okay,
got
great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, this video will be available in the membership area. So anyone who wants to take me on for that silver pin in the March-April Tournament of Champions, May 11th, right, John?
Yep, May 11th.
All right. I'm excited. All right. Well, thanks, guys.
What are the most common things that you do when you're reviewing stuff in Poker Tracker 4?
Oh, great. Awesome. So tags. Let's talk tags for a second here. So there are a lot of, you can customize these tags. And when I'm playing, if I'm in a hand and I'm not sure what to do, I'll tag it with the elephant because I need to remember to go look at it later. If I'm in a spot where I see a opponent making a decision that I think, that's either really smart or really stupid, and I need to figure out which before I decide how to play against this player later, I'll give them a tag like that to go and look at them in particular. Routine review, I just use when I'm going through hands on like a monthly basis. I'll filter, maybe this is more your question, I'll filter them according to like number of big blinds won or lost, or how many bets went in before showdown, or a lot of those filters and reports that we were talking about. And then I might tag a whole class of hands with this one so that I can later run a different filter and see which ones showed up in both of those, because that's one of the things about the Poker Tracker 4 is you can only get so many layers at a time without having to kind of cross-reference some of your searches. And so I find tags are a good way to do that. And of course, share with RecPoker Nation when it's the bomb. And we just got to talk about it on the podcast. And then for me, when I'm categorizing opponents, I'm mostly talking about what kind of errors do these people make. And when I'm classifying my own hands and my own play from a session, I'm usually classifying what are the kind of errors that I made in this hand. So I use these tags to just help sort them, and I don't remove them. So over the course of, um, I don't want to search any of the filters right now because it'll take a long time while the screen's loading, but you could search my database and you could pull up all the errors, all the hands where I've said, oh, I've made an error calling by searching for the fish. You could say, oh, here, this was just a negative play. And we need to drill down. Why does this feel so dumb what I did here? And so there's lots of ways to use these tabs to kind of categorize hands for later review. And then the real way to do it is over in view stats to use the filters and reports there to look at classes of hands that have the thing in common that you're trying to study at that time, whether it's hands of your own or hands of other people, hands that were played in a certain way, hands where you were in position or out of position. But the one thing I always do is I just look at the biggest hands because it's easy, and I say, okay, like these are the hands that changed the changed the narrative of that tournament for me. Like what could I have done differently here? Did the hands just play themselves? Are there lessons I can learn? And then everything else I try and group more by like concept, or if I'm studying something that month, I'll try and tag a bunch of hands that have that element in common and then review them all together, something like that. But it's a nerd's paradise. I don't need to tell you guys, it's a nerd's paradise here in Poker Tracker 4. And you can customize these, obviously. One thing I find is that well, whatever, that's too nerdy. But I find it's helpful to alphabetize some of these because they don't let you change the order otherwise. So you have to get kind of funky with punctuation and things if you want things to be at the top of the screen. I guess the only other thing I'll say is I'm not gonna be able to do that right now. Oh yeah, I can. Note tracker, where is it? Note tracker. Note tracker. Oh, don't get me started here. So I had to sort of rewrite this because for the same reason, to renumber them, because what this is it tracks information about specific hands. Your HUD tracks information about percentages and ranges and how often people do certain things. This note tracker tracks the actual hands that people do things with, and then it shows up later in your HUD. Do I still have that one up here? Let's just.
Yeah, I noticed that showed up when I was playing on Sunday.
Mhm.
And so is this something that you have control over?
Yes, it is. So here, let's pull up a hand. So in this one, it's this little icon here, note tracker. And what it does, I'm just going to move the camera so I can actually see that, what it's doing right now. So it's got the top two there. They're all P is for pre-flop, and so it groups them by flop. This person I only played 21 hands with, and it was a turbo shove fest, so we probably didn't get post-flop much. But so it'll say 3-bet all in with these stacks. This is a hand they did that with. Open limped. This is a hand they did that with. So every time they go to showdown, this tracks the actual hand that they showed down and then looks back through that hand and all the things it did, it takes a little note. So, and as you can see, it gets pretty specific about final table stuff. I think if you were playing this a lot of like single table, like when I was using this for the first time, I was playing a lot of double or nothing single table tournaments. And when people play for stacks becomes a big factor. So there's a lot that people, again, some of the players that have a lot of hands, like you get some very detailed information about people's ranges. That makes it easier to build counter ranges. So one of the ways, so the way to configure that is up here. No, it's in tools, note tracker. And I should say PT4 does also have an equity calculator and an ICM calculator and a quiz too. It's got that built into it as well. And it's got a great helpful community and everything else. They've got Table Ninja, Poker Trackers, the nuts. But Note Tracker probably the thing that I like the most out of it, because
So you can turn those on and off as far as how it displays, but it will
yes,
continue to capture that whether it's on or off.
that's right, active
Okay.
over here.
Yep.
And
So
then
if
you
it's active, you'll see it on that person when you hit that note tracker note icon.
yeah,
Only if it shows if you have it checked for active.
I believe that is correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Because that's way too much. If you,
Oh, I know. Yeah. Yeah.
there's only
And,
a few things that I really want to know when I'm playing in a tournament. You know, I don't know. I don't need to know all that crap.
right. Yeah.
Sure you
No,
do,
so
Rob.
No, too much. My brain will explode.
well, that's one of the nice things about having it in a pop-up, that you can sort of ignore if you need to. Like I think here, let me just get out of here for 1 sec. One of the things, if you want to, instead of just hovering over it, you can click it up here, and then you can sort between overall, pre-flop, flop, turn, river. You could take some of those off, and then it would only show the other categories. That might help cut down on some of that. And then when you're putting your own notes in here, there's lots of ways to draw attention to them specifically. And then you can also tag a color on that player. And when you save it, they'll get that color around that HUD, which is a nice complement to the software for each poker site. So I do like Note Tracker a lot, and it is pretty sophisticated. We'll just take a quick look here. And it's easy to work with these. So again, there's cash and tournament. All right. So you have to be careful that you're working in the right one, because the HUDs are designed to work only in one, and they won't copy across. It's very simple. You can choose a stat. Okay. It'll have yours won't look like this. It'll have a different number next to it. I had to renumber all these so that they showed up in the order I wanted them to show up in my HUD. And then it gives you the text that you want to see there. In this case, it includes a card range. And then it gives you the filters that it applies to the hands. So these are all, anyone who's involved in logical notation or computer programming will recognize these if-then type clauses. Basically, this whole program's built up of these, and you just query all these different points, and it tells you which values came up according to that query. I'm probably the worst guy on this panel to be talking about that right now, but that's the terminology I'm choosing to use. And so you can manipulate all this stuff with a click of a button. So what I basically did was I went through here, I found all the ones that I liked and wanted to adjust, and then I duplicated them one at a time, and then I went in and changed all this information until they did what I wanted them to do. So now I've got a different one here.
You got too much time on your hands, Jim.
Yeah, I know, right?
Way too much time.
But I can't dip a toe in, Rob. I can't. When I get into this stuff, I gotta get wrists deep, elbows deep, and I just gotta like make it. I gotta get all dirty with it. So I just dove into this, man. I just dove into this. But it's easy to do, and honestly, it's fun. It's fun for me. Like, God save me, right?
Now, how many hands did you have stored before you started making changes?
Probably like 100,000.
Yeah.
Something like that. I think once you get 50,000 hands, you start seeing good data. Like, you can pull.
Okay, that's what
stuff.
That's what I was getting at, because there's, I guess they're giving you a default type of stuff that they're tracking. So you can customize this and track what you want.
Yeah, and you can turn their stuff off or delete it, and you can turn on your stuff or only some of your stuff. Okay. You can even go in and change it for different tournament stages. You know, like I don't. That's even too sophisticated for me, but you could have or you could just pretend that for you pre-flop, turn, flop, and river meant different things, and you could use those filters that way, right? So there's lots of different ways to separate the data, and you might have to get a little creative. Like for me, I use punctuation to get creative in this alphabetized system. Everything that I want to be up top has to start with a period. And then, or you can go through and renumber them all, like I say. That was the easiest way for me. And then leaving gaps because I knew I'd be adding more ones later, right? Like 0 to 100 is all pre-flop.
The old programming tricks.
Exactly, right? I don't need to tell you. So, but you can, like, I just developed this note for raise first in ranges for players, and it tells me every half blind gradation up different card ranges that they have for different opening sizes. Now, again, is that really that valuable? Probably not over the grand scheme of things, because in tournaments, people are going to be playing different stack sizes, different ante structures. But in like a 6 max cash game, they're not changing their bet size by position nearly that much, and the blinds are always the same. So if you can get a sense, okay, well, this guy opens 2 to 3x with this, but 4 to 5x with this, and then get an actual list of all those hands, I mean, that's valuable when it comes to, because poker is just about putting people in boxes, right? Getting better at developing their ranges and making decisions based on the hands that you think they could have. So whether this works by eliminating classes of hands or by making other classes of hands more likely, well, hey, I've got some opponents where I can tell you they only do this with these hands. I mean, boy, they're pretty easy to play against in those spots, you know? Like a very general, easy example would be players that like only ever call 3 bets with pocket pairs. And then they only ever proceed past the flop if they make a set. Well, 3 bet them all the time. And when they call, make a very small bet on the flop with your bluffs and make a very big bet with your value hands. And I mean, you've kind of solved that exploit for that player, right? So then it's just a race to see, are they going to pay attention? Are they going to counter exploit you? I'm getting chills just thinking about breaking people down and taking them apart. You know, like that's what I love about this. But that's you know, the better the data, the easier it is to do that. And the more personal it is, you know, like I understand this data a lot better because I've asked it myself. Like I've asked it what questions to ask. Like some of this stuff is great. Look at all the different ways it sorts how people donk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people don't donk very often. In my stats, hardly anyone donks over 8%. And if you can see which 8% that is, if it's like it's not balanced, that tells you a lot about how to play with them. You know what?
I've got 3 donk stats, it looks like.
Right. They
Is that
might
what you
be.
got?
I've got 1,
So
2, 3.
Did you create one?
I probably created one.
Okay.
I probably created. What are yours?
Donks flop with top pair better.
Yep.
Less than top pair, no draw. With no pair and just a draw.
And then I added donks flop no pair range, which is only going to be helpful to see if they're like suited or connected. It's not going to actually tell me what the flop was. So this is only to see if they are the kind of player that donks with pocket pairs that hit sets, or if they donk with suited connectors or other draw hands or something like that. So that's not quite as reliable because you have to kind of extrapolate from that a little bit. But it's a good example. I probably just took one of these rules, clicked duplicate, and then changed it down here to be what I wanted it to be. And then every time you do that, you have to test it. Every time you change a rule, you have to test the rule by running hands through it and seeing what comes up. Because usually what comes up is, oh, you didn't do that right. You've asked a logical impossibility. Please go back and write a rule that makes sense, dummy. So I get that message a lot. But that's the sort of process that you go through with these. And there'll be some stats in cash that aren't there in tournaments, and there'll be some note tracker stats in tournaments that aren't there in cash as well. So that might, Rob, that might have something to do with that too. Maybe
Oh,
they have
sure,
different ones.
sure. Now, we talked about RecPoker offering a HUD for anybody that signs up for Poker Tracker through their site.
Yes, sir.
Are we talking tournament HUDs and cash HUDs?
The current plan, I think what we're going to do is we're going to offer one, both is the theory.
Okay,
Um,
yeah.
I think it's just going to be the same one, and I'm going to create one in a tournament format and one in a cash format, and people can just choose which one they want to use it for. And then I'm going to do that for a simple one, and then for a more complicated one as well. So there'll be 4 HUDs, but there's really just 2 HUDs.
Cool.
And you can use one. You can use them both for cash or
And I can take advantage of your nerd hood.
That's it. That's what. Hey, we're just taking advantage of each other's nerdhood. I'll see you in the book study, you nerd.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, I'd love that. And anytime if you want to get in here and start messing with Note Tracker and changing the notes and stuff, get me on the phone. I'd love to. This is like vacation time for me.
If I struggled all day Sunday when I just picked up Poker Tracker this weekend.
Cool.
I started playing it when I had like 4 tables going. I didn't understand how to configure my HUD so that the HUD would stay in the same spot every time.
Oh yeah, totally.
So every time I changed tables, I'd have to go and rearrange everything again. Well, I got that figured out today.
Sweet. Yeah.
I wanted to help and figured it out.
And that's not, and you have to do that for every different table
Format.
layout too, right?
Yeah,
And then
right.
lock it in place for each one.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. That's
I just have the 9-player. You know, that's the one I play most often.
yeah.
So.
And I notice here that you can actually there's a left click. There's a left column for active, so you don't have to go through each one and click each one. You can actually just go by group. So I've got a few off here. Are they Omaha hands or something? Is that why?
Yep.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, they're Omaha. I've got them deactivated because they're Omaha.
So how much Omaha do you play?
Yeah, it goes to show, right? I played my first hand in January as part of the RecPoker mixed game series.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah. I only play Hold'em. It's embarrassing. Because I don't dip a toe in. This is what I'm saying. I gotta be like,
in 2 weeks we've got a new fish at the table.
Oh yeah, 2 weeks. Look out, man. That's gonna be scary. I heard there's like a high and a low, and there's is it
Omaha 8.
We're gonna see.
Split pot game. It's an easy game. It's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just put your chips in when you got the nuts on the flop.
Putting my chips in is my only strategy in Hold'em.
It's a little trickier though in Omaha because I put my chips in, I flop the absolute nut straight. Of course, there's 2 clubs on the board,
right,
and
right.
You know, then the board pairs and another club shows up, and it's like, oh yeah, my nuts are like nothing. I'm 4th best. Doesn't happen in Hold'em that way, very
Yeah, that's right. I did notice that. In fact, Omaha was probably. I really enjoyed 5-card draw. And I really enjoyed Pot Limit Omaha. I could see myself playing more of both of those. So thanks, John, for bringing those into my life. I don't know if we'll see how this next one goes. The steeper the learning curve, the less excited I tend to be about it. Need all the help I can get. All right. So let's just and yeah, you can see even here. Look at how few river notes are available, eh? And look at how few river and turn notes are available compared to all these flop and pre-flop notes. That just goes to show you just don't get that information as often.
Looking at the hands that I capture, and it's like 1 in every 5 you actually have you see a river.
Yeah.
If even it's even worse in tournament. Like you capture all that tournament hands, like you rarely see a river in tournament, especially later in a tournament.
Yep.
Yeah, it's nuts. I watch it because I got it on one screen and I'm watching it as they collect, right? I'm watching the hands that I'm collecting as I'm playing. And it's just amazing how few times you even see a flop.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But look at yours. You've got like That's amazing. I've never seen anything like that.
Oh, which one? Which one?
The screen that you're showing me, you're seeing flops and turns and rivers all the time.
Oh, well, this one's because they were practically most of these were all in pre-flop, I think, because this was this little shove spot.
Oh, okay.
This was like a little short stack spin and go tournament. I
Gotcha.
just played to get some hands in here. But yeah, so that's not common.
That's amazing. I've never seen anything like that. That's
Yeah. Well, now you see why I'm so quick to put my chips in the middle, Rob.
I see that. Yeah,
It's
you're
the
so
only-
used to it.
Yeah, it's the it's the only way. It's the only way to win against these players.
Oh man.
So here I will just I am just going to scroll through this now because you got me talking and now I'm interested. I don't know if you can really see if this was full screen on your screen, this would be basically like real size of the big stupid comprehensive HUD that I use. And I've got a few different villains that I've just screenshotted their HUDs where I've got between 1,000 and 5,000 hands on them in cash play. And I'm just going to scroll through them quickly so you can sort of see how it changes very drastically from one to the next. And then maybe we can look at a couple and then we'll probably wrap this up. So just the different color groupings is really the only thing.
They're formatted by the strength of the stat, right?
By the which?
By the strength of the stat. So
Mm,
if they're beyond a certain range, it's gonna be red. If they're below that range, it'll be yellow. It might be green if it's in this range. So
Exactly.
You're formatting it by range.
yeah, so each stat has a color, has a series of color ranges built into it.
Mhm.
And sort of like the leak tracker that we were looking at, if the player falls in, if the stat falls into what I think is like a good range, it gets a certain color, and then more loose gets a different color, more tight gets a different color. And
So is red a scary stat for you, or is that something that you're going to try to exploit?
red is too tight, and
Okay.
green is too loose, and orange is too aggressive, is the default. And then
So
yellow
is
you got it, baby. Pittsburgh Steelers. Can't go wrong with yellow, right?
okay.
And then yeah, you heard me, Taylor.
Going.
And then the only other thing is that's basically it. But of course, because I've got so many, I've got folding stats, raising stats, calling stats.
Right.
I had to abandon that pretty quickly. So it's more like yellow's mellow, and then it sort of depends beyond that. Let's pull up. Let's just.
Well, you're gonna have to be able to look at the color right away, as opposed to trying to understand the number.
Exactly. And so I see the color, and that tells me I don't need to actually drill down into the data, because
Right.
I already can tell if I'm going to make an exploit against this player or not.
Yeah. So if you've got this F57, you know that's orange.
Right.
So you don't really care that it's 57. You just know
Exactly.
that it's orange.
Exactly. And so, all right, let's just go through. Let's pick someone who I've got a fair amount of hands. This is a break-even player. Okay, their name, we'll just call them Nuts because that's the start of their name. So the 5K is the number of hands I have on them, and -1 is their win rate in big blinds per 100 over that sample. So they're a very marginal loser. We would call this a break-even player. This this one's a slightly bigger font than the rest, and it's always going to be a different color. This is the number of big blinds. So if I'm sitting here and this player is to my left, everything here is going to be stuff I want to tell at a glance. The number of big blinds, the percentage of the time they fold their blind to an open, the percentage of the time they 3-bet to an open. And having those next to each other means that I can also tell the percentage of the time that they call, because if they don't fold and they don't raise, they call. So by having those two stats together there, I actually get the value of 3 stats, and tells me a lot about the player.
So
Up top,
77% of the time they call.
in this case, they 23.
Oh, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah,
the
that's
opposite
right.
of that. 23% of the time they call.
And since they're 3-betting 2%, you can pretty much tell what those 23% are going to be, right? when you take the top 2 out of the top 25%, you can get a pretty, you can tell a lot about what kind of hands they have there. Up at the top here, the top row, these top 2 rows are all pre-flop. VPI, PFR, 3-bet. Cold call in position. So this doesn't count calls from the blinds. This only counts every time they took a passive action in position that was not a limp. So someone opened in front and they called. I find that really valuable. And I wrote a special note for that tracks the stuff you call in position separately from the stuff you call in the blinds.
In Note Tracker.
In Note Tracker. And then F is here for fold to 4-bet after 3-betting pre-flop. Just to get a sense of, at a glance, how polarized is that 3-betting range when tested. This one you don't use very often. It's how often does the big blind fold to a small blind open when it's folded to the small blind.
Yeah, I don't even know if I'd keep that stat.
Yeah.
I mean, why,
You need a certain and that, that's why, again, like, you don't look at every stat here every time. Half the art of it for me is just like knowing what to look at. This second row is all about what happens when they open. Do they limp and fold? This person limps and folds 25% of the time that they limp. So if it's 0 or there's just a dash next to it, that tells you something about their limping game. And then raise first in and raise first in by late position. So having these two next to each other helps me understand how positionally aware this player is, and also gives me a sense of what their actual steal raise first in is, which helps me construct my big blind completion and defending and 3-betting ranges.
So the first stat 24 is
this one
total.
here, yeah.
That's total raises,
Total.
regardless of position.
Yeah, raise first in. Yep.
And then another one is based on late position.
Cut off and button.
Cut off. Okay.
Yep. And then this is the fold to 3-bet after opening overall, and then fold to 3-bet after opening in late position. So again, just gives you a sense of, should we be targeting? Often what you'll see is that this number is much higher. And so it makes them a better target because their ranges are wider. This person actually opens wider and calls more. So that's great. Let's get them into a bunch of post-flop spots with wider, weaker ranges. And then this one with the arrow is how often they 4-bet, period. So that just tells you a lot about that player. So then these next 3 rows all kind of work together. Okay. On the left here, this is C-bet in a 3-bet, C-bet in a 3-bet pot, C-bet, period, and bet flop. So again, you get a sense of how they think about flop betting and how aggressive they are with the initiative versus not. And so it also has those for turn and river. C-bet turn, C-bet river, bet turn, bet river. In this case, their stats are pretty similar. And then the same for folds over here on this side. So this was C-bet in a 3-bet pot. This is fold to C-bet in a 3-bet pot. This was C-bet flop. This was fold to C-bet flop, turn and river. Fold to flop, bet, fold to turn, bet, fold to river, bet. And what I like about this is that it's very clear if people have lines, if people have streets that they get out of line on. Often you'll see players have one street where they tend to fold a lot, or one street where they never fold. And you can bluff or value bet those streets exploitatively against this opponent in a way that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. Another way to do that is this bottom line here, which is exclusively about the flop. Donk, fold to donk, float bet, fold to float bet, check raise, fold to check raise, and raise flop bet, fold to flop bet raise. So that's just a 2-bet. Hardly anyone has a balanced check raise or raise flop bet stat in my database. Everyone is 5%, 3%, 8%. It's all value. So if you can find someone who has a percentage up there in the double digits, that tells you a lot about them. and it tells you how to. And again, your note tracker is keeping track of all these hands that they went to showdown with when they check raised the flop, when they donked the flop. You know, like look at how active this guy is. He floats the flop 48% of the time you check to him. So going into the hand, knowing about this guy, helps you shape your pre-flop opening range when he's on the button. You know, there's lots of information you can take from this. I'm not going to be bluffing him on the river when I'm c-betting my way there because he only folds a third of the time. But I might lead into him on the river because he folds 2/3 of the time to a bet that's not a c-bet.
So how about a check raise on the flop against a guy like this?
Against,
a bluff check raise.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly. Great
talking about a
example.
bluff check raise
Great.
because in his mind, the only time he's doing it is when he has value.
Exactly.
So he's going to assume that that's what you're doing also.
And you can see here, he folds to flop raises 80% of the time.
Right.
Just like you say, right? So this is a guy where you'd be nuts to raise him with a value hand, right? You can you never raise this guy with a value hand because you're never going to get paid. But bluff the heck out of him. And I want to know that when the flop comes out, you know? Because I'm playing a bunch of tables. I'm just gonna, this table's gonna pop up, I'm gonna look at it, and I'm gonna think, oh, I've got a strong draw or a set or something. Like this is a hand I might normally raise. You know, is this a good player to use this strategy against? And then on the right here, I think this is just won at showdown, went to showdown, aggression frequency, and aggression frequency on the river. So this is a break-even player. Let's take a look at not quite that in depth, but we'll just take a look at another player. So here, this is Dankman. Got about 3,000 hands on them. They're winning 12 big blinds per 100, and they're playing a very different type of game. So you can tell just by looking at this guy. He's playing 10-8-3, cold calling in position 4% of hands. That's not even every pocket pair. So he's really not playing many speculative hands at all. His overall is 10%, right? He's folding 90% of the time someone raises his blinds from late position. So you want this guy on your left, right? And again, check raising and raising, they're twice as high as the previous guy, but it's because he's only getting there with the top 10% of hands. So these are still value only. You know what I mean? And he knows it because he's folding to check raises and raises 100% of the time or 75% of the time. I've got 3,000 hands on this guy. He's folded to a check raise 100% of the time. Okay, that's exploitable. There's a guy that I play live a couple hours east of me here who has folded to every check raise I have put on him. In our history of playing together, he has folded to every single check raise. It took me a couple weeks to catch on, and I've bluff check raised him every single time we've played together since then. And like you can just look at your HUD, you know.
You're just printing money then. Just
right.
printing money.
Right. And you know what's crazy about this guy is he's not even getting out of line on C bets, and he's still folding to check raises and raises. So you can start to put a lot together about a player and the way they think by looking at all these different stats all at once. And I find even with all the filters and reports and that kind of stuff in Poker Tracker, it's still hard to look at them all together. It's hard to see how does this player respond in different spots and different streets in particular. Like this guy, 3,000 hands, has never folded to a turn C bet. Ever. How
so
can that be?
If he gets to the turn, he's got it.
Right. And
he's
folds
Taylor
2/3
Moss.
of the
If
time.
he gets to the turn, he's Taylor Moss. He always has it.
And against a winning player, like this is a winning player. So, I mean,
well, this is a cash game, right?
Yeah.
This is cash game. It's totally different stats in a tournament situation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Let me see if we've got one more here. Well, I don't know. I think you guys kind of get Is there someone else that I have a lot of hands on? This is a pretty tag player here. 17-11, 6% 3-bet. They're break even. But look at the river here. Look at the difference in the river. When they have the aggression, they're betting the river 73% of the time as a C bet. And when they don't have the aggression, they're betting the river 24% of the time. So that part of that's going to be a function of them getting there with stronger ranges. But that also tells you how they think about when other people make those actions too, right?
Yep.
And again, look at these. Donk, check raise, and raise, all
Yep.
single digits. And that's going to be a theme for these player pools. Single digit raises and donks and that kind of stuff. So if you can get a note that tells you what they're doing with that, that can be very reliable.
Oh God, now I'm gonna start nerding it up. I'm gonna start
Yes,
getting into this
sir.
stuff, aren't I? God,
That's
dang it.
right.
Got you. Hook, line, and sinker, Rob.
I'm gonna wait till I give a few more thousand hands before I get too jiggy with it.
So I find it's nice, like I said earlier, and then I'll get on out of here. But even if you're not going to use a HUD like this in play, reviewing hands, if you're playing with someone, I'm not sure if it would be as helpful for tournament review, but if you're reviewing hands, just to get a sense of where are they out of line. Like, does this player have something that then you can say, oh, okay, now I got to go drill down on this player in this way. I got to use those reports and filters to find out more specifically how can we use this information to take them apart. But in real time at the table, you know, I know who I'm check raising against or for value and who I'm bluffing. I know who I'm floating the flop. I know who to fold against when they fold the flop, you know, and that I can just tell at a glance. So that's the one benefit of it, is that if you know where to look on it, it can give you a lot of information. But yeah, every one of these stats has to have its own little color range built into it, which is a nightmare. And to be honest with you, I let good enough stand in, and I just started copied and pasted a bunch of these that had similar values. I didn't end up crafting a specific color range for each because the law of diminishing returns was kicking in, and it was like, what really matters is it in the middle or high or low.
Okay, so you didn't nerd it up as much as you thought.
No, not as much as I'd planned. I don't know how many stats are here, but there's
Okay,
probably,
you have work to do then. You still
I
have
know,
work
right?
to do.
Well, that was one thing, is I knew I would always be tweaking it. That was the kind of project that I would never be able to complete. So I had to just decide, as long as they're like, let me see. These ones here will all have the same color group, for instance, so that if they're out of line from one to another, it draws my attention to it. Yeah, so it's not really true that they're like good ranges and then outside that, it's more like similar ranges to each other. And a lot of it I built off my own ranges, and then the areas where I know I get out of line, I just took the leak tracker data, and I took their for the stats that I had duplicated from there. I just used their ranges for winning ranges here. So there's I mean, also I'm not a very efficient programmer with this. I don't know what to use. I don't know what kind of language to use with that. So I do all this stuff like very clumsily with meat cleavers, and like with an analog with a pen and a paper and stuff. So I think people that were smarter than me or had more experience with this kind of stuff could be a lot more efficient at it. But if you want to talk about like how to physically go in and like change the change the note tracker notes and stuff like that, yeah, give me a call anytime. Well,
Right.
yeah, is there anything else, guys? I feel like you're spoiling me with all this. You got to talk about Poker Tracker 4 and HUDs and cool stuff like that for a little over
Well,
an
I guess
hour.
this is kind of cool for anybody that sees this later. They can see what is available in Poker Tracker. Not everybody's going to nerd it up like, you know, Jim Reid, for instance, but I think there's a lot of value in it. And I know I see Taylor using it when I watch him, you know, streaming. I started using it last weekend. I was just gathering hands. I don't know how much I actually used it to influence my play.
Hmm.
But I can see that as I get more familiar with it and start using it more and more, that this will definitely do that.
Mhm.
But and just to keep people from being too intimidated, how many years have you been fine-tuning this stuff, Jim?
Oh, yeah, good. I mean, a decade, tweaking around with it, and at a time several years ago, I was playing a lot of poker, and I was investing resources into this, and my time was one of those resources, and I did spend a lot of time on this, making it just the way I wanted to, and you know, while I was seriously playing poker, it did help a lot, but it you know, put as much into it as you want to get out of it. That's excellent advice. The baked in stuff that Poker Tracker comes with is an excellent place to start, and you can get a lot of value out of it without having to customize it at all. Yeah. But thanks, John. I appreciate that. It is. I mean, it takes a long time to get familiar with the language of the app. I don't need to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds. When I had Poker Tracker before, I used it. I barely used the HUD at all, and I used it a little bit more to just to track my wins and losses. But I never got very deep into doing a lot of analysis. But this is the type of stuff I am more than capable of geeking out on.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's why we get along.
Yeah.
Well, if I do another one of these, we'll probably get into some of the reports and filters that you can run in the more hands-on parts of this over in stats. Let me see. Well, we won't do it now, but there's you can have the Poker Tracker for a database pull a lot of that sort of specialized data in interesting ways. So we'll talk about that another time, but it is a very sophisticated program, and you can have a lot of fun with it. So I'd encourage everyone. And if you are feeling like it's a little intimidating, or you're just not sure where to go with it, DM me. Go to rec.poker, instant message me, look me up on Twitter. I'm sure any of these guys would also love to help. Let's learn this thing together, and let's get better at poker playing together. All right. Well, thanks, guys. That's fantastic. Really appreciate your time. Great questions. It was nice to get some feedback on where to take this.
Fun
I guess
times, fun times.
Fun times. I
Yeah,
hope someone.
thanks, Jim.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Taylor. Hope
By
you
the
get.
way, I wasn't playing in the rec poker game tonight, but I was playing in a sit and go while we were talking, and I won the sit and go. So
There you go. The
at
run good
least I had a little
continues.
bit of. I can't do anything on that rec poker social distancing.
I
but
busted
can
early.
Go on America's
I could
Card.
concentrate more.
Yes, it showed. I could tell we were all putting our best foot forward into the webinar here. So well done, everybody. Save that rec poker home game run good for when there's a silver pin on the line.
There you go.
That's what I'm doing.
Of course, you have to win a bronze pin in order to be eligible for the silver. So.
Oh, quiet. Quiet, John. Quiet.
All right. Good night, guys. Thanks a million. That was fantastic.
Good night.
All right, take care.
Yep.